If I were to pinpoint exactly which version of Smash was when we started to see them pushing the envelope on constraints, it would have to be Brawl. Prior to that, the entire roster of 64 and Melee featured exclusively Nintendo franchise characters. Entering Brawl was when Smash began to expand not only as a game series but as a licensing phenomenon. Sonic made his debut as a playable fighter, and while this wasn't the first time he collaborated with Nintendo, it was still a branding achievement nonetheless. But what really surprised me was when they introduced a character from Konami's Metal Gear series, Solid Snake. I think we can all agree that was a real shocker, even more than Sonic. Snake would be the first in a long line of collab characters, and he would certainly not be the last, or even the most surprising. From then on, we've gotten Mega Man from Capcom, Pac-Man from Bandai Namco, Ryu and Ken, Cloud, Bayonetta, Simon and Richter, Joker, Hero, Sephiroth, Kazuya, Sora, motherfucking Steve. Point being, Super Smash Bros. Brawl was the turning point for the franchise as a whole, and that extended to more than just characters. Snake's reintroduction to Ultimate was accompanied by all the unorthodox and deviant quirks attached to him from the last century he was in, and fortunately for him, his popularity migrated along with it. That being said, I think it's appropriate for him to be the next episode of Why Everyone Plays, so let's get into it. Oftentimes, fighters are categorized into different archetypes based on their win condition or playstyle, but every so often you find that one character who really doesn't fit into anything in a traditional sense. You could argue that Steve isn't really a sword fighter, nor is he a brawler, nor is he a zoner, nor is he a grappler, but I feel like a lot of those unusual fighters ultimately end up in the trapper category, and that's sort of where Snake falls into as well. For those who haven't watched my video on trappers, I highly suggest you do so after this one, but for a crash course on the class, the goal of a trapper is to orchestrate checkmate scenarios, situations where the opponent, regardless of what move they make or what button they press, will result in a negative outcome for them. Trapping isn't native to a select group of characters, as there are terms like frame trapping or ledge trapping that demonstrate the same basic principle. But even amongst other quirky characters, Snake is truly one of a kind. You can't find anyone else who plays like him. That subsequently makes him a character who requires a completely different set of rules, strategies, and fundamentals to play against correctly. Granted, every character has their own set of nuances. It'd be foolish to think a game plan designed around stopping Roy would apply directly to Marth. All the same, even though Smash Ultimate has taken every design constraint known to man and effectively threw them out the window, archetypes do share strengths and weaknesses. For example, a weakness you can easily exploit among rushdown fighters like Captain Falcon, Fox, and Roy is their need to approach. Therefore, if your character is very good at playing defensively and waiting for them to come to you, you can still fall back on that playstyle as you gather further information. What makes Snake throw a wrench into everything is that he has a few character traits that force him and his opponent to play the game completely differently while still retaining a lot of what makes a character fundamentally strong and consistent within competitive Smash. If I could TLDR why everyone plays Snake, it would go something like this. He's a matchup check with fundies. Typically, matchup checkers heavily bank on that aspect of their gameplay to give them an edge, as they lack some of the conventional strengths that you will find on top tiers. Once the opponent learns the matchup, however, that character's threat diminishes considerably. One of the few exceptions to this, however, is Snake. Even if you manage to learn what to look out for, you're still facing an opponent with concrete strengths that cannot be dealt with by merely seeing them coming. Pushing that further, most of those concrete strengths are a part of the matchup check. Chief among them would have to be his ambiguous disadvantage state. Snake's neutral B grenade at first glance is a pretty generic throwable projectile that detonates after a short time or when struck, not unlike the bombs from Young Link and Toon Link. The big difference between him and them is that his bomb comes out at literally frame 1 and has active collision detection even when held. This means if you hit the grenade even when he's holding it, it can explode, dealing damage to him and likely you in the process. While it may seem counterintuitive to take damage to escape disadvantage, it's often the lesser of the two evils. Deliberately exploding a grenade on yourself disrupts your opponent's advantage state, usually forcing both of you to reset back to neutral depending on each other's positions. The very presence of grenade changes the entire dynamic of a fight. Now, unless your combos are quite literally true, Snake can escape any string of attacks with the press of a button. This forces the opponent to be extremely cautious about comboing, juggling, or even pressuring him, especially the latter. A common tactic many Snake players like to do is pop a grenade, then hold shield. Remember, once the grenade is active, it has collision detection, regardless of what Snake is doing with it. If you attack his shield and hit the grenade, it still explodes, giving him a free conversion into any aerial he wants at low to mid %, as the knockback sends you straight up. None of these features come at the cost of traditional zoning either. He can have up to 2 grenades active at a time, and the delayed explosion coupled by the fact that attacking them sets them off makes them exceptionally useful and annoying zone control tools that deal double-digit %. Normally, when you get close to a zoner, you eliminate or at the very least mitigate the threat of their projectiles, but Snake's projectile is both an offensive and defensive tool. It's widely regarded as one of the best neutral specials in the game for a good reason, because it fundamentally goes against prevailing wisdom of neutral, advantage, and disadvantage. Furthermore, even its main weakness, being that it damages him as well, isn't that big of an issue when you account for Snake being heavier than the majority of the cast. So any mutual explosion is a net positive for him. This isn't something you can overcome just by being aware of it. Grenade has so many practical applications that still retain influence even if you know all the ins and outs of it. And some characters physically have no answer to this kind of projectile. But hypothetically, let's assume you have airtight execution and complete awareness of Snake's grenades. That's when we run into the second conventional strength. As mentioned earlier, fighters with long range lose a lot of their pressure when you get up close and personal, as they lack either the frame data or mobility to escape. Snake's physics are definitely subpar, but he has no shortage of answers for close quarters combat. I'd argue at times he has better close quarters combat than actual brawler characters. Forward tilt is a frame forward 2-hit attack that deals 15% base damage that can start closing stocks at around the 130 to 140 mark, ridiculous for something that fast. Then there's up tilt, a very notorious move that needs no explanation I'd imagine. It's a frame 6 scorpion kick that does a ton of damage, lasts a long time, has deceptively good horizontal range, and hits like a truck. When sweet spotted, you can expect this move to kill earlier than most characters' up smashes on a frame 6 startup, and it's not even that unsafe on shield either. Then there's down tilt, a low kick that despite its appearance doesn't really have much combo potential if any at all. Aside from being extremely fast at frame 6 and long, notice the animation. On the very first frame, Snake pancakes all the way to the ground, letting him dodge a lot of attacks that don't hit low profile characters. It's essentially a stronger but slower version of Kirby's down tilt, but a criminally underrated move. The last grounded normal I want to go over is dash attack, widely considered one of the best in the game for its disjointed intangibility, fast startup, outrageously long coverage, and ambiguous cross-up on shield. It's a burst movement option that Snake heavily relies on given his poor mobility. All of his tilts and dash attack come out of frame 6 or earlier, tying him with some of the fastest frame data characters in the game like Sheik, Mario, etc. And since he's a relatively tall character, he's got great range on his moves. His aerials function a bit differently, not really known for their speed barring 2 of them but for other reasons. His down air doesn't look too impressive initially until you realize it is a frame 3 startup and does well over 20% damage, giving Snake a fantastic out of shield option, which adds another aspect his opponents have to be aware of when trying to pressure him. His up air and back air protrude his legs out in their respective directions for a drop kick that have really long lasting hitboxes, particularly his back air, and neutral air hits 4 times for extreme amounts of damage. On the subject of damage, all of his normals do ridiculous amounts, easily double digits, with some dealing as high as 20 or more. That's normally stuff you would see on a heavyweight, not a guy like him, but it's another thing that people like about the guy. Snake deals damage, a lot of it. You can't afford to lose too many neutral interactions against him because a few normals and grenades are enough to put you at kill percent, and for him, that threshold is quite low. The thing about Snake's normals is that they're not really what you expect. Down airs are usually the slowest to start up for most characters, and they tend to spike. Snake's down air is the fastest normal in his kit, and it's more for damage output and out of shield. Up air is supposed to be a juggling tool, while Snake's up air is a raw kill move off the top. Up tilt's also supposed to be a juggle tool or set up into a juggle, whereas Snake's up air is a hard-ass kill move. Neutral air for many characters is a long-lasting hitbox, but for Snake, that's back air. Simply put, all of his moves are weird, not just his specials, but that doesn't mean they're not effective. For those of you who saw my video on Ness, I talked about how most jack-of-all-trades fighters like Mario or Wolf have ABC, whereas Ness has XYZ. If Ness has XYZ tools, Snake has wingdings. But those wingdings were designed to be just as threatening as alphabetical tools. Everything about Snake is different, yet they still feel conventionally powerful. There is no other character in the game with a projectile that you can remotely control, which presents a ton of different options and mix-ups that you would only know if you fought as or against Snake. There's no one with a droppable, attachable, undisarmable remote detonation bomb with the kill power of a smash attack. There's no one with an up smash that shoots a projectile that comes up and then back down. Thanks to his ability to throw tons of different projectiles and hazards at you, you're essentially fighting 2 characters at once, him and his bombs. Good Snake players excel at mixing up how much of which character they want their opponent to focus on. For example, let's say you're fighting Snake and you're at kill percent. He's chilling in the corner throwing grenades, Nikitas, and planting C4s everywhere, conditioning you to tunnel vision on avoiding and shielding those moves, and then runs in and down throw up tilts you, or vice versa. Let's say he's recovering high with Cypher and your attention is towards the upper blast zone, waiting for him to land so you can attack him. Little do you know, you completely neglected to remember where the C4 was and he detonates it right under your feet. There are so many things you have to pay attention to that Snake can exploit. However, even if you're one of the rare few with the presence of mind to be aware of those things, that doesn't necessarily remove the threat of them. Once again, his explosives have very large hitboxes, do a ton of damage, and can kill. You still have to respect them. His close quarters game is still unfairly strong, so you have to respect that. And sometimes, even if you do respect and try to play around them, there's nothing you can do since after all, he is a trapper. He can create situations where no matter what option you take, you're gonna get thrown into disadvantage or die. Some characters don't have an answer to Nikita. He has so many ways to kill you that you have to be ready for all of them at all times. Make even one lapse in memory or judgment, and that can make all the difference between life and death. All of these abnormalities make fighting Snake particularly a good one in matchup check and fundies check. I know that sounds confusing. Basically, you have to forget everything you know about Smash and relearn it in an entirely different way when fighting Snake, but at the same time, you still have to have a strong fundamental sense to know when to go in, when to fall back, and bide your time waiting for the right opportunity to strike, as well as maximizing your advantage state. More often than not, that works in his favor. Snake players can abuse his unusual repertoire and good fundamentals to win games. The overall utility provided by his moveset is so considerable that he lacks a single bad or useless move, forcing you to have to be aware of all of them at all times. And that's one more thing he has to his advantage. He's very distracting to fight against. Now you might say, how can a guy with a frame 1 combo breaker and an unconventional moveset require good fundies? Don't they inherently contradict each other? Yes and no. As stated earlier, Snake is one of the best in the game when it comes to conditioning. He can condition you into playing a certain way or choosing a certain option and then punish you for doing so. A cornerstone of fundamentals is reading your opponent's habits and responses either from the way they play or how you influence them to play, and then responding to it. And I can say with full confidence that Snake is one of the best at doing that. Another example of fundies would be bread and butter options to do at what time. Snake has that too. Unlike other matchup checkers who sort of have to do the same thing throughout the entire stock, Snake has natural flowcharts and transitions from low to mid to high percent. He can open up a match by chucking grenades at you or going for basic combos like up throw up tilt, grenade explosion into neutral or down air, etc. At mid percent, he can start going for edge guards or ledge traps using a side B, up smash, etc. And to higher percents, he might fish for up tilts, down throw tech reads, and so on. That's really what sums up Snake's popularity. He's an unconventional character with conventional strengths and understanding. You don't have to learn some weird gimmick like ice climbers, nor do you have to hope your opponent doesn't know how to fight you like, say, Villager. Snake is a very digestible character with straightforward moves that are good in non-straightforward ways. This also comes with the added benefit of options that give him a tactical advantage in neutral, advantage, and disadvantage that other characters can only dream of, and he gets all of that while still being a very confusing, disorienting, and exhausting opponent to fight, a trait that's never solved, which sets him apart from other matchup checks. Because he has such a vast array of attacks, tricks, and options with his moves, Snake is a very high skill ceiling, as demonstrated by the likes of Apollo Kage, Kronos, Dio, MVD, Alandis, Shogun, etc. They always find a way to surprise even the best players in the world. Snake doesn't have only one trick or strategy to default to, he has tons. Working around them requires an altogether different set of rules and fundies for his opponent. Mind you, he does have a ton of weaknesses that can't be overlooked. He's still slow on the ground, and the air would only be reverses to mix up his movement. His close quarters combat can still be snuffed out by an opponent with sufficient range, and it's super easy to edge guard him horizontally. Moreover, despite having a frame 1 combo breaker, his disadvantage state is still one of the worst in the game. Not to mention grenades potentially sending him into an even worse disadvantage than before. Other smaller things like the fact all of his bombs are considered energy projectiles, so anyone with energy absorbing things like Ness, Lucas, and Game & Watch make his life a living hell. And in a battle of projectile versus projectile such as a Rob, Me Gunner, or Mega Man, he's met his match. But overall, Snake is a good character. He's just as unpredictable and unconventional as your mid-tier matchup checks, but has enough practical benefits and said tools to make him a respectable top tier. And that's why so many players use him at all levels of play. What are your thoughts on Snake? Do you agree or disagree with my points, or do you believe there's something I forgot to mention? Feel free to share it in the comments down below. That's gonna be it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, it would be awesome if you could give it a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and checking out my other Why Everyone Plays videos if you haven't yet. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in the next one. Take care.